Hello, listeners. This is Chris Deaver, and you're listening to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast, where we bring you candid, thought provoking conversations with top HR leaders and experts. And here's your host, Pulkit Joshi. Today, we have the privilege of hosting Chris Deaver. Chris Deaver is a culture shaper, co founder of Brave Core, and co host of the Lead with a Question podcast. He's coached C-level executives and influenced Fortune 500s from the inside out and has spoken at Fast Company, Apple, Disney, and Comic Con. Chris is co-author of Brave Together, Lead by Design, Spark Creativity, and Shape the Future with the Power of Co-Creation, published by McGraw-Hill. This has been featured in the Next Big Idea Club with Malcolm Gladwell and Adam Grant as Inc.'s top 5 books for transforming business in Big Think and Forbes. Chris has had a dream career at Apple and Disney, working with inspiring teams that shaped iProducts and Star Wars experiences. He's a regular contributor to Fast Company, featured in the Wall Street Journal and Entrepreneur. Chris, thanks a ton for taking out time to speak with us today, and welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Thank you, Pulkit. It's great to be with everybody.
Thank you. So let's get started with an icebreaker question, Chris. If you could travel back in time to give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be and why? That's the first part of the question. The second part is how has that advice shaped your approach to your career and personal development?
Yeah, if I could go back in time and tell myself something, I would say, don't be afraid. Uh, Fear can cause us to, uh, have challenges that are unnecessary, right? It's energy that's wasted. And what I would say is be brave, and don't just be brave, but be brave together with others, and lean into that. And that's the future. What I've experienced since I've learned that is that really you can achieve impossible things with others. Uh, uh, and it's there's no shame in asking. In fact, the people that ask and ask for help and partner with others and work with others, they actually, it's like the great bands, right? The Beatles, the U2, they just continue to create amazing music. And the same is true in our work, in our lives, whether, it's in our, yeah, in life or in leadership, it's the same. So being brave together with others.
Great. Thanks, Chris, for that advice. I'm sure that would have left quite a few people out there inspired. Let's move on and let's talk a little bit about your career, how your journey in the HR function has been. Right. So my first question for you on this part is, can you share a memorable moment or experience from your career journey that has significantly influenced your approach to leadership and innovation?
Yeah, I had a moment years ago when I had listened to and I'd read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I had a Walkman. This will date me, but Sony Walkman I carried, and it had the cassette tape for the 7 Habits. And this was a definitive book that really changed how we think about leadership. And Stephen Covey, before I met him, he was already a mentor to me, and I just felt like there was such a uh, call or a calling to that kind of work in my life. And so the opportunity came where I was able to meet Stephen, and that was a life changing experience for me. And I think mentors can do that in our lives. And what actually happened too was when I met him, I looked him in the eyes and I said, thank you for your work. It's made a big difference in my life and in the lives of many people. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, and he just kept staring. He said, we've met before. And I said, I haven't, I haven't met you, but I feel like I know you because I've listened to your book, right? 7 Habits so many times. And, he just smiled and he said, yeah, we've met before. And, what was really just a connection, and it felt like a connection to that type of work of leadership and teaching and inspiring people to think differently, right, about their impact and how they can innovate in their life and iterate and do more and do better with teams. And that's the work I set out to pursue. And so I did it in a different way than others. I felt like I needed to go through uh, the experience of being inside companies and making changes and shifting cultures from the inside, and some that were already great cultures. But I started at Dell, and that was a bit of a fixer-upper, and it was an incredible journey that led me to the boardroom with Michael Dell himself and helping to transform that organization. And then I went to Disney, had some great experiences there, and then Apple, working with great leaders, like people like Tim Cook, to lead them into the future. And since then, I've written a book, Brave Together, and I'm excited for that message that is really about how we can lead the future.
Great, Chris. Thanks for sharing those moments. I once had the privilege of attending a workshop that was based on Stephen Covey's uh, insights, right? And of course, that left me uh, inspired again. The kind of impact that he has left on a lot of people out there is really profound. So I'm glad you got a chance to meet him. That would have been, of course, a great moment for you. Okay, let's keep going. Uh, so, Chris, you've written a book. There are so many things that you're trying to do, and you have done in the past. I'm sure you are part of a lot of events out there, and in your role as a speaker and thought leader, what topics or themes are you most passionate about sharing with others, and why is that so?
Yeah, thank you, Polk. It's a great question. Uh, I think a lot about uh, how to build cultures people love, and people as in the people that work, that are part of the culture, and then also people that experience the culture, right? Customers, people that buy into the products and services. And what's interesting about this is that when we look at the data, it tells us that the companies that have the strongest brands also have the strongest cultures. So that the customer experience, that they love the brand, it correlates to that people love their experience in those companies. And so the input equals the output. But yeah, how to build cultures people love is a theme that I speak about, or I talk a lot about. And there's another one that is quite simple, actually, because we ask ourselves, how do we get started? Like, how do we start doing something that big? And one of the conversations we have and presentations I share is how to reimagine meetings, right? Most of us are on Zoom or hybrid, and it's a different world, and engagement is different, and sometimes it's easy to get exhausted with meetings, and if they're agenda driven, it can get boring. And there's generationally, there's a wave of people experiencing meetings, and they want something different. They want to feel uh, activated. And so how to reimagine meetings is another conversation. And another one is around turning teams into brain trusts. And this is something that Pixar does. Apple does this. The great companies work in brain trusts. And this is a kind of a muscle memory for shaping culture that makes for the most innovative products on earth. Um, and the other one is supercharging culture with co-creation. So that's something we really focus on, is this movement that's happening. It goes beyond efficiency, beyond effectiveness, and this big wave of the future is about co-creation. So I focus on that as well. Yeah.
Great choices there, Chris, I must say. Thanks for sharing that. Let's now talk about a topic called as leadership and influence, right, which is of immense importance to all leaders out there. Um, and next few minutes or so,
We're going to concentrate on this topic and seek your views on some of the burning questions that are of utmost importance to a lot of people out there, right? So I'll get going with my first question. In your experience, what role does HR leadership play in driving organizational change and fostering a culture of innovation and growth? That is the first part. The second part of the question is how do you leverage your influence to champion these initiatives within your organization?
Yeah, I think it used to be, HR would kind of check the boxes on, helping with onboarding,
Yeah.
things like recruiting, talent strategy, some of these different kind of traditional approaches to helping an organization, and maybe some coaching they throw in there. But mostly, performance management, compensation, all the things on the list. And these are all important, but they're part of an ecosystem. And HR now, really the opportunity is for us to step in. And of course, don't even wait for a seat at the table. You show up as part of really shaping what this table is and what the future is. And a lot of leaders in the business are thinking about wrestling with questions about AI, right? The future of the workforce, the future of culture. We're talking more about culture than we ever have, and HR is uniquely positioned to help shape all of the answers to these questions. But we have to pose the right questions. We have to explore in a co-creative way with leaders. And so rather than just look functionally and say, hey, well, I'm HR and this, this person's this or they're that, whatever function, we have to look at it holistically and start to share that future. And so the way I think about that is, well, I'll give you an example. We were working with an organization, and they were concerned about people not being very committed. They were losing talent. Um, they felt like there was a disconnect from where you know where they wanted to be, also in their growth. And we asked some of the top leaders, what do you want to accomplish? And they were thinking their goal is to sell the company, right, in 3 years, grow it 3x, and then sell. And that's a worthwhile goal, right? Except they're saying, and people are not committed. And so the question I asked was, you know, do they know, right? Do people know that that's the goal? And they say, yeah. And so you can see that that's not a very motivating goal for everybody else, right? The leaders of the company are going to make a lot of money, but everybody else, they could care less. In fact, it's disengaging, right? And so what we suggested was look at the culture, right? Zoom out and ask yourself, what do I want this to be? What is my intention? And if the answer is growth, but to achieve growth, that's true growth, and where people want to be part of something special, that's all about culture, right? Steve Jobs, they would ask him, what's your favorite product you've ever created? The most important product. Most people would think he'd say iPhone or iPod. No, he said the culture. And so if you get this right, and this leader started to do this instead, right, that we were working with, I worked with. And what he did was he took that approach. He took that approach with his team. They focused on the first principles of their future culture, and they started to build towards that, which was we want to be a talent magnet. Right? People love the experience here. We want to create the best products, right? We want to have experiences that inspire our customers. And so they focused on those things rather than the financial target. That could still be in the back of their mind, but the beauty of building culture is it goes way beyond. And what happened was exactly that. Fast forward 1 year, and they had not just surpassed that 3x goal, they went 10x as a company. They went public, and their growth and their impact, their results were off the charts. But most importantly, was people loved working there, and there was a different culture that had emerged, and they had far better products. And so the impact of culture, sometimes it gets pushed aside, but it can't be. It's at the heart. It's the heartbeat, right, of the company. And HR, right? No pun intended, but it's the heart rate, right? We're right centered in that heart, and so we have a unique opportunity to influence as in the heart of the center of companies, and help influence and shape where they want to go. and how they want to accomplish their North Star, and helping to shape that with all the challenges that we're facing, these exponential change with AI and everything else that's emerging. But there are companies that are winning. I mean, we just saw NVIDIA's results, and they're doing something right, clearly, on the tech front. It's not just their technology. There's a lot about principles. If you read between the lines, right, when Jensen Huang says there's power and there's joy to be found in suffering, that's a powerful principle, right? It's uncommon sense. But it's also inspiring, because what he's saying is they're willing to make the hero sacrifice. And we talk about the hero's journey, and we like the part at the end where we get all the prizes and the rewards, right? And the hero is championed, and he's living in his kingdom. Well, that's not the part that matters the most of the hero's journey. The part that matters the most is the hero's sacrifice. And if a company like an NVIDIA is fully bought into the notion that they are willing to suffer and to sacrifice for the sake of others, that they're making others the mission, there's nothing more powerful on this earth. And so, of course, incredible products can emerge from that, right? And innovation that we've never seen. And so companies that can do this, and this is where we influence, right? With BraveCore, we have conversations with leaders all the time about these questions, and where they can build that kind of strength and that kind of muscle memory and capability into their organizations. And it's I'd say it's life changing. It's also world changing.
Awesome. Great insights there, Chris. Thanks for sharing those. Now, let's talk about the fact that leadership isn't about making decisions, right? It's also about listening and learning from others. How do you actively seek input and feedback from your HR team members? And how does this input inform your decision making process and enhance your leadership effectiveness? I would love to know more about this.
Yeah, I think this is something that this is hidden wisdom, right? And you could call it a mystery, but I think it's been around for a very long time. If we go back to even Socrates, right, or prior to that,
Yeah.
um, he was the Socratic method is questions. It's harnessing the power of questions. We see this in the great leaders. Ed Catmull, that started Pixar, who worked with Steve Jobs the most, um, he leads with questions. We started a podcast called Lead with a Question, based on this principle that we learned from Ed. And it's powerful because, like Ed, when he started at Pixar, he would get a lot of people coming to him for answers for everything. And he said he was just handing out answers. He's a smart guy. He has a PhD, right? He's one of the first in the field of computer science. He actually created the technology that's used in most movies as far as special effects. Lucasfilm used, early Star Wars movies he worked on. And so he's a smart guy, but what he found was, he said, I wasn't empowering anybody. And what he did actually was his wife told him to go on this retreat. It was a meditation retreat for 7 days. And all he could do there was ask questions and listen. And he said this changed him. It changed his life. And then it changed him as a leader. And when we lead with questions, it gives people an anchor, and it helps them feel like they can be part of their own solution to their own problems and challenges. And I don't know of anything more powerful than that in leadership. And so if we're asking ourselves as leaders, what's the answer to this? How do I get the answers? And we're scrambling for answers. Well, we also live in a world where AI and Google can produce answers, 100 times or 1,000 times faster than any of us. And so it's not a matter of just the answers, right? It's about asking the right questions. It's a far more important thing and far more powerful for leaders.
Great insights there, Chris. I fully agree with you. I think asking the right questions is extremely crucial. Let's keep going. Talk to us about examples of HR leaders or mentors who have had a significant impact on your leadership journey, and what lessons have you learned from their examples that you continue to apply in your HR leadership style?
Yeah, I've had some great leaders over the years. So Jeanette Dennis at Disney, she's a great leader. Did exactly what I just shared. I mean, would ask great questions. And I think great leaders, they're patient. right? And that's counterintuitive to a lot of what we see about performance and hustle culture, right? And there's nothing wrong with getting things right and getting great results. But the leaders that take the time to recognize people, to see them for who they are, and to inspire them, and to let them wrestle with the questions and challenges that they have, and to do that together, it's powerful, right? So I had another leader years ago in a large organization who, when I had questions that I thought, this was when it was enough to where I had to bring it to him because I couldn't solve for it myself, right? Big questions. And I'd share it, and he would say to me, what would you do about that if you were in my shoes, for a day or for a week? And he honestly wanted to know the answer. He didn't just ask that, he asked it genuinely. And what happened with that was he was offering an invitation to co-creation, right? And so what I would do is I'd start to share an answer, and pretty soon he would say, well, that sounds good. Or he'd start to shape it with me. Well, this part of that is a good solution. What if we do this too? And then we combine these things. And then he'd send me off. He'd say, go, that's great. Good. I, I like what you're doing. And he'd let me go, do the thing that I suggested. But I would have never come up with an answer if he hadn't empowered me, right, to build the solution with him. And so those are some examples. More recently, I mean, of course, at Apple, I had incredible leaders, that inspired me. You know, just people that could see something, different in, and offer the opportunity, to really think differently. And one that comes to mind. She was actually a peer of mine, not a leader, but she was definitely a leader in terms of how she works. Her name's Lucky, and talk about Socratic method. She would ask such powerful questions that just make you think and make you better. Um, and at VMware, I worked closely with the chief people officer, Betsy Sutter. She's an incredible example of just leading and inspiring people to do great work. And I think there's great examples like this all over the place in HR, and especially in HR, we talk about you know making an impact in terms of service, right? Serve, don't. Uh, and there are others I've met over the years. Angela Ahrens, who ran retail at Apple, she was the head of Burberry. She had a philosophy in the Apple retail teams. Most people would think, hey, you go into a store, a retail store, and you just buy stuff, right? And that's the experience. Period. End of story. The products, either they sell, they speak for themselves or not. That's it. But she never thought about it that way. She thought about it as, serve, don't sell, right? So if you go into the Apple stores, and there's more than 500 locations throughout the world that she helped launch. She's a good friend, and she set the tone for an experience that is a fundamentally different experience than you have in any other store. And what that has led to is, we're in a time when retail has the retail world has shrunk as far as foot traffic, people showing up in stores. It's actually increased at Apple, and like typical stores, they get maybe in the hundreds every day. Apple's in the U.S. 600 or 1,000 people, many more per day. And then in places like China, you get like 80,000 people in a store in a day, right? And what they're getting is, what they're going there for is not just to experience these incredible products, but is to experience the joy of people who care and take the time, right, to uh, to appreciate them and help them on their journey, right? That they're the hero of that story. And I think great leaders find a way to ensure that their people are the hero in the story.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for sharing that. Now let's talk about one nuance which we all sort of uh, b- have some sort of fear from, right? I'm talking about setbacks, right? Everybody goes through their highs and lows in their career. So talk to us about a leadership challenge or setback that you encountered in your HR career, and how did you overcome it to emerge as a stronger and more effective HR leader?
Yeah, this is a good question. I had an opportunity when I was at Apple. I interacted with some great leaders, phenomenal leaders, and many of them had worked with Steve, Jobs, and they'd worked on really challenging problems, like launching the first iPhone, right? For example. So smart people, technically. There's one VP in particular who there was feedback relating to, he wasn't collaborating all that well, right, with his peers and with other within his team either. And this feedback came to me, and I realized I need to share this with him and do some coaching and kind of open that portal. But I knew he's a headstrong individual, and that this could go either way. He might not take it well, but that was a risk that I had to be willing to take because that's who I am, and I think that's our job, right? With HR is to also influence and help leaders get better and be better and do better. And so I shared that feedback with him. Hey, there's an opportunity for you to collaborate more, right? And there's a lot of people feel this way, and he didn't take that very well, actually. So he was offended, and he literally wouldn't look me in the eyes, wouldn't talk to me for weeks after that, and that was strange, right? So he iced me, and I could have taken that as to, hey, just give up, and because but he was my main client, right? As far as the work, what do you do in that situation? Well, I realized I got to have a heart to heart with him. So I called him and I said, hey, look, I shared some feedback with you. I know you didn't like it. My intention wasn't to offend you. My intention is to share the truth so that you can do better and have an opportunity to grow. And I heard enough of this feedback to know that it's real. And he said, well, I'm not sure about that. And we had a little bit of a disagreement there. But at a certain point, I think he realized that what my intentions were, that they were good, and he conceded that he could look at that, maybe doing something about doing differently as a leader. And then he said to me, well, I got some feedback for you. I said, okay, tell me. So I think you need to work on getting to know my team better. I said, okay, I'll do that. Thank you. And from there, we after that heart to heart, we did a lot of great work together. I think sometimes, being brave and stepping into a space where, it might be, a firing line, or it might be tough. It might be not what you expected. It may feel like a failure. It may feel like this thing is just flipping upside down. I mean, I felt like I was a void, right? It was dark for a little while there. I wasn't sure what my future at Apple was going to be, but as I moved through it, I had great support from other HR partners who knew the situation, other leaders who understood, and ultimately that leader, I'd say, embraced it, but he definitely was more open, to working at a different level, and actually he leaned into collaboration as a theme, for his organization. And so, of course, then the pressure was on him, to do better at that.
Thanks, Chris, for narrating that story. Certainly, that would have helped you become a more effective HR leader. And I think it's very important that we have those heart-to-heart talks once in a while, especially when we are getting into that corner where we want to escape that tough conversation. I think such conversations do help us overcome the obstacles. So thanks for sharing that. um, let's keep going. Looking ahead, what do you believe are the most critical leadership competencies and skills that HR leaders will need to succeed in future, and how are you preparing yourself and your HR team to meet those demands and challenges head on?
It's a great question. There's a lot of directions you could go on this, but I think if we're looking at the core, right, like it's not just the branches of the tree or the leaves of the tree, Like this is the challenge that a lot of HR leaders, we can find ourselves in, is just honing. If leaders are saying, hey, it's a year of execution, right, or it's results, then there are HR leaders who can get stuck on that, right? I mean, I was just talking to folks. Okay, I'll say it. I was just talking to folks at Meta, and this is a company that presumed that layoffs were going to be a great thing because it's the year of execution. Well, now they're saying all these people in HR, oh, this is actually a bad idea. Like it didn't actually accomplish what we thought it would. Wow, surprise, right? Massive layoffs. Turns out they don't really help the culture, right? Um, it's actually a really stupid move. And why it is because they overhire, and then they end up, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, letting all these people go. 400-person teams, right? Friends of mine who are in these roles, and they built these teams over years, and suddenly they're just wiped out. And they think that this is going to suddenly help their bottom line, which it does for a quarter or two. But then after that, the damage that's been done is so deep in the culture that it may be irreparable. And it especially is if there's hubris in the leaders. And I think any company that is stuck on execution as the answer to everything is already delusional, right? Let's just, and this is simple data, right? All you have to do is go out in the street and just go try to ask anybody on the street, hey, do you want to work with my company? Our vision is execution. You think that's going to inspire anybody to do anything? No, they're going to walk away and say, that's crazy. Like, why? All it does is inspires guillotines. You're like, that's it. Execution, really? It's just cutting things out, period. So I know that's what is not the future in my view. Yes, we have to get things done right. We have to get them done well. But the opportunities lie in being co-creative, right? Seeing yourself not just as an employer or as a manager or as a leader, but being co-creative with others. The attributes of an HR leader who's going to lead is that they're seeing this co-creative balance. And you have to be a co-creative force too, right? Where you're brave, like we've talked about, where if a leader is saying to me, hey, this is the best idea ever to just start, cutting everything. And all we have to do is refer back to, the times of, take GE, for example. Weren't they like the big shot company, not too long ago? And now where are they? Now, granted, the manufacturing business has changed a lot, but they just ended up, slashing and cutting and, all these things. And it's like, did that really serve them? And what is their culture now? And it's not like a tragedy. It's just that I don't believe that it's actually what it could have been otherwise. And this is just one example, but if you look at companies that do this well, or have over the years, let's take Apple, for example. Well, they're intentional about how they hire. They bring in talent at a very slow pace, typically. And what they're doing is they're being very mindful and thoughtful of not just bringing in the best A talent, so not B or C, but the best talent. But they're also intentional about, we don't want to be down the road 3 months from now or 6 months or a year, having overhired, right? And this is where HR can influence these types of things. So we stay focused on the North Star. If the North Star is, hey, we want to have, and it's fine to have goals in the market to be, high growth and to have a big impact and to, please shareholders and all that stuff. That's fine. But let's stay centered on best products and best experience for the people. And those things will power that. And they'll power it far more than any short-term strategies of, assuming that a layoff is going to solve, a bunch of things. So I think being co-creative is one skill set of HR, being brave in how you do that, and challenging, I think, us to be innovative. And in HR, that's different, right? Being creative or innovative. It's, granted, there's a lot of things in HR we have to do that are, kind of spelled out. There's policy, being a guardian of integrity, these things. Yes, all that. But how can you be creative with leaders to get them to think differently, right? And so if something like, okay, yeah, well, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. And we know that you're not gonna, you're not gonna cut your way to the future, right? When I was at Dell, their sky was falling. They were in a place that kind of like Facebook was in recently, or Meta recently, and just we're going through constant rifts, right? Constant layoffs. We're seeing other companies go through this. Tesla's going through some of it, and there are market forces that are unpredictable, and we can't always explain what they are, right, in each space. And that's a maturing market with EVs, so maybe that's just something that's happening on the consumer side they have to deal with. And we can't always predict what that will mean for the workforce, but we can be more intentional and thoughtful, and especially HR, in influencing leaders to think in terms of a human, people-powered, company that is like a perpetual motion machine, right? In science, I remember being in science class, and we talk about this, like, well, perpetual motion machine, it's impossible to build. Nobody's ever done this, right? Well, they haven't, but they haven't in the way we think about that. But the companies that have cultures that are the best cultures in the world are probably the best approximation, if not actually perpetual motion machines, but they're people powered, right? And they're people powered where you have collaboration and connections that are horizontal. It's an ecosystem. And even take AI, for example, right? All these companies are worried about AI. How are we going to lead the future in AI? How are we going to do this, right? And there's questions about, going back to layoffs, do we just replace everybody with AI? Like, they're coming for the knowledge workers, for white collar. They came for blue collar before with the robots. Now it's white collar. Well, some of that may be true. So we have to embrace AI as an amplifier, right, for the work we do. But beyond that, the question for leaders should be, what does this mean for the organization? How should I be thinking differently about the entire thing? Like this professor at Northwestern, he does AI experiments with his classes. He sends them off, and they create AI solutions, and they turn them into companies. And he said the biggest opportunity, because Gen AI is also different than Google, right, or search that we've experienced. So there's a default setting for a lot of engineering people and anybody in general, consumers or users of search, is that it doesn't work the same. It's generative, as in you could prime it, or you could share an answer to it, something or a question, and it might have an interaction with you. It might hallucinate. It might say something different, right? It's not always perfect. And so, how do these things get smarter? How do you create better products and services with AI in a company? Well, there's no better way than to do this with people, right? And with teams that are supercharged. And how do you supercharge teams? It's with co-creation, right? It's the brain trusts. And you have to be able to connect across silos or break those silos down and have sharing that's horizontal. So this Northwestern professor said it. He said, it's sharing, right? And we did this at Apple with AirPods in an iteration with them. And, we found that there's nothing more powerful maybe than sharing and creating a brain trust where you have a standing meeting that's like a cross staff meeting, hardware, software, operations, retail, even maybe, and design, all these people at the table building something together, right? And when it doesn't happen like that, then you end up with a Star Wars, movies 7 through 9, that they're not incomprehensible, but they're not like a consistent approach like Mandalorian was. And why was Mandalorian, that show, had a consistent, solid storyline? Was you had a team that's building this together. All these directors sitting at the tables together, or at the table together, building what this whole story is going to be. And that's true in business. And HR can be the facilitator of this, right? Of helping to shape what this future is going to be, and making it a co-creative one.
Awesome, Chris. That was profound for sure. I can't recall if I've ever gotten an answer so detailed and so path-breaking, I would say. So thanks for sharing that. Let's now talk about HR technology, right? I think we have talked enough about leadership and influence, and you did do justice to a lot of the questions that I asked. So thanks for that. Uh, my next question for you is, looking into the future, what role do HR leaders envision HR technology playing in in shaping the future of work and leadership within HR functions? That's the first part. Second part is how are they preparing themselves and their teams to leverage emerging technologies like AI, generative AI, to drive innovation and strategic impact?
I love this question because there's so many unknowns. And so it's, like going back to this Northwestern professor, he said, uh, everybody says they're a futurist, but he said, and he's a very informed person about the future, but he said, I consider myself a presentist plus 2 months. Now, that may be extreme, right? Because I think we have indicators of where things are trending, and definitely on the AI front. But, things are moving so fast that there are iterations that are literally emerging every day, right? Every hour that are something new and something better, and not just nominally better, but like 10x, 100x better. And so I think in that world, because if we think about HR tech or technology that supports the people side of the business or in HR, is like, yeah, there's a lot of more static solutions that have been built either in-house or they've purchased. And there's some great stuff out there, right, that does what it needs to do. But I think there's a lot of what if questions here that are more on the imagination side, right? Albert Einstein, right, one of the smartest men who ever lived, said back then, imagination is more important than knowledge. And then he said, it's the preview of life's coming attractions. Well, what are the coming attractions in this whole technology space for HR? And I think you have to almost pull everything back and just zoom out and look at, maybe put everything in the parking lot, right, for a minute and say, what are we trying to accomplish, right? And not just right now, but in the future, 3, 5, 10 years from now, right, as it relates to our people. Well, we want the best talent, right? A players. We want to give them the best experience, right? Like we talked about earlier, create a culture that they love and that customers love, that's powered by people who love their culture. And then, what are the aspects of that? Oh, well, we got to compensate these people highly. We got to figure out ways to develop them. Okay, all those things. And then you could get into questions of, okay, what technology is going to help support this? The problem is in the past, we've always asked those questions in reverse, or we haven't asked the questions. We've just said, oh, we need a compensation tool, a payroll tool. We need a tool that gives us a directory of where people are at, and then maybe throw in some talent stuff there, which never really got solved. I don't know that there's a great talent tracking tool at all, like on the market. So I think these are opportunistic. The upside is AI creates all kinds of advantages in helping to create what this can look like or what it can be. But I think we have to step back and ask these larger questions that are really solving for bigger opportunities. And as we do that, then the kind of technology can unfold that's also co-creative with AI, right? Start to build stuff with AI instead of just isolating into coding. And see, coding on the engineering side was just linear, right? It's like it's discrete. You build the thing and then you launch it. The thing about AI. It's like almost like a living thing. So if we're building a living thing that's producing technology that is enabling these kind of powers or superpowers to understand our talent, to have a point of view about them, right? Like what could that look like? I mean, what if you start to create technology that can start to connect teams inside the company? It can start to create opportunities for them to ideate together, right? They can build think tanks, they can create things. What would that look like? I mean, those are the kinds of questions I think that are far more interesting and then just, did we get the payroll system right? And those things are all important. We have to do that. But that's baseline now, right? The other stuff up here on the high part of the value chain in that co-creation space, that's all the future, right? It starts to influence the impact of the brand, what this can be, and what people's experience is, both employees and customers.
Awesome. Solid insights there, Chris. Thanks for that. This brings me to the last question of this wonderful episode. Any piece of literature, any book, documentary that has shaped your leadership journey? I know you yourself, you have authored a book, right? But would love to know if you have any favorite book that you can share with us.
Yeah, I mean, Seven Habits is phenomenal. It set the tone. Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. It talks about, it's a reflection on his experience with building Pixar culture, and it's introspective about Pixar culture or creative culture. And they brought this to Disney to help transform the culture of Disney. I was there for that. I love that book, and it's been transformative in my life. And then Brave Together, the book we wrote, because I wanted to find a book that could describe the future that we're living in, right? And give us those principles that could guide us in this future, right? And we call them meta principles in the book. And one of them is lead with a question. That's the first principle. And that's about curiosity, right? And the power of imagination. And then there are other principles, right, related to co-creation. This big wave of co-creation that is the future that we're living in. And another one, as an example, is we talked about is make others the mission, and the hero sacrifice. That's a powerful way to live. It's a powerful way to lead. That matters, and other things too, right? Following true north and the power of alignment with others. But yeah, those are books that have really mattered in my life, and I was looking for the book that would lead me into the future. And Seven Habits and Creativity Inc. have been very helpful. And Brave Together, the book that I wrote, or I co-wrote, is the book I've been looking for, really.
Awesome. Some great recommendations there, Chris. Thank you for that. This brings me to the end of this awesome conversation. Chris, thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and expertise on the CHRO Mindset podcast. It was amazing to listen to your insights on leadership and influence, especially. I'm sure your thoughts would have left a lot of listeners out there inspired. Please continue to enlighten us all with more books. Including the one that you've already written. I would try and go back and get a copy of that for sure. But again, thanks a lot for taking out time to speak with us on the CHRO Mindset podcast today.